right, hello everyone. Sorry for the little bit of a delay there, but so glad you all could join us for our final webinar of the 2023 application series. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can jump right into things. Here we are. All right, so my name is Reva Ramadorai. I'm the director of the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge. I also have a colleague with me on the line that's helping me out with some technical issues here. So thank you to Liam who's helping. And today we're going to go over just some basic frequently asked questions to help you cross that finish line and get your application in by the deadline, which is coming up next week. We're also going to go through the application and just do a step-by-step walkthrough to help those of you who might have just started and might have just opened it. I know it can seem a little bit daunting, but it's definitely a doable task. So you should all be totally set for turning it in by the deadline next Wednesday. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Just some basic background on the competition. From 2021 to 2022, the competition was known as the Broadcom Masters, but Thermo Fisher Scientific is our new sponsor. We're very excited to be working with them. So if you're familiar with the competition before this year, there's nothing much that has changed, just the sponsor. I also wanted to take a minute to say congratulations to each one of you on all of the hard work that you've done this year by completing a science fair project. Earning a nomination to the competition is a huge honor, and we're so glad that you've taken the next step to open the application. And if you haven't gotten there yet, hopefully this webinar convinces you that it's a good time to do so, and there's a lot to win and not much to lose. So let's go ahead and continue here. So, like I was talking about, the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge is the nation's premier STEM research competition for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. You can apply online at that website link. Entering in means you have the chance to be named a top 300 junior innovator or a finalist. So one of the first questions or most frequently asked questions that we get is about the invalid password. So you might get a message that pops up on your screen that says your password isn't valid. Help, what do I do? The first thing is to email us at jic@societyforscience.org. Tell us the name of the fair that nominated you. And if you don't know that, you can tell us the name of the city or state that you live in or your fair was located in. And that will help us find out which fair your nomination is from and get you into the application. The next question that we often get is, what should I do if my school is not listed? So when you get to part 2 of the application, part 3 of the Part two. You're asked to select your school from a drop-down menu. If you don't see your school on the list, you can email us. And in your email, be sure to tell us the name of your school and give us the exact address as well. That way we can add it into our list. You'll then get an email confirmation to say that it's been added. And sometimes this can take a few minutes, up to 10 to 15, before it actually appears on your end. So just be patient. If it's really not there, you can email us again, and we'll definitely help you out. All right, next question. So you might have some trouble uploading forms. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you're using all your forms, your files are in PDFs. This is the only format that our system will accept. So the first thing you need to do is convert your file, if it's not already in a PDF, to a PDF. You can do this by going to the website that we have listed in the application. You can also find one online if you Google convert to PDF. Make sure you're asking a parent or teacher for help with that. And if you have a hard copy of your forms, for example, maybe you printed out the parent permission form to get it signed, and your parent or guardian signed it, you can then scan this and upload this as a PDF into the application. If you don't have a scanner, you can just take a picture on a smartphone, email that to yourself, again, convert it to a PDF and upload it. Another tip here, don't use emojis in the document name. Sometimes this prevents it from actually being successfully uploaded. Another question on the next question that we often get about is about science fair paperwork. So in this section of the application, we want to see any and all safety forms that you used at your science fair. So the task in the application will ask a series of questions that will help you know what to upload, but you can email us if you have specific questions about your paperwork. You might have trouble accessing the paperwork that you submitted at your fair. That's okay. If you are unable to get those forms, you can contact whatever adult was actually the one that supervised you during your research, who approved your project, and ask them to write a brief letter explaining what safety precautions you took, if you had any prior approvals before your research took place, what that was, and you can upload it instead of a form. All right, so another question that we often get is, may I submit a different project than the one I was nominated for? You must enter the same project that earned you a nomination to the competition. So this also means that you can't add any new ideas or make significant changes to your project. If you conducted more trials, for example, you were just gathering more data on the same thing, that's okay. You can include that additional data in your application, but you shouldn't be changing your procedures or your methods anyway. You shouldn't be updating your devices. You can talk about any updates you want to make or have made in the application in a future directions section. We'll talk about that when we go through the application. Finally, when is the application deadline? So you must submit your application by this upcoming Wednesday, June 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you submit your application before the deadline, you can always go back and make edits to your application up until that 8 p.m. deadline on the 14th. If you do edit your application after you've hit submit, make sure that you scroll to the bottom of each application task that you've edited and hit the mark as complete button again so that you can be sure all of your changes were actually saved. We'll go through how to do that in just a minute as well when we take a look at the application. So I'm going to pause for a second and we're going to switch over to the application. In the meantime, I also want to say, if you have any questions, make sure you're typing them into the live chat. We're going to go through all questions, or as many as I can, at the end of this webinar. If I don't get to your question during this webinar, you can always email us at JIC@societyforscience.org. Still takes me a minute to get the new name straight. All right, so 1 second. All right, so hopefully you should now see the application screen, and we're going to go through basically from the start and just point out some important or helpful links to you all. So hopefully this helps for those that have just opened an application and want the rundown on everything. So before I got to this page, the first thing I did was create an account. So if you're creating an account, it'll ask you for a password. That password can be anything of your choosing. It is not your fair password. It can be anything that you want to just make sure that you remember that you can use to access your application again. Once you have created an account and started an application, you'll see your application here. I've already opened it, so it says continue. If you're just starting out, it'll say apply, or open. Before we get there, some resources that might be helpful. Up top, we have this pages drop down where you can see our resources. I'm going to open that, and our FAQ. So these are two pages that I definitely recommend checking out if you have questions about certain parts in the application, they don't get answered today, or if you have them over the weekend or off hours when we're not answering email, though we're definitely going to be answering email over the weekend, and we'll try to get to you as soon as possible. This is your best bet for a quick response or a quick answer to your question. We have a ton of video resources here that are more in-depth walkthroughs on every task of the application. We also have past webinars linked here. You can find all of our 2023 webinars on our YouTube page as well. Then we also have our FAQs, which again are a lot about what I just went over in this webinar, but it has some other additional questions in here that could help. The next thing I want to point out is your account page. So right now, I've already validated my email address, but if that is going to be one of the first things you're going to need to do too. It'll have this prompt here that says you must first verify your email address if you have not already done so. So if you haven't validated it, you'll see a little confirm my email green button at the top here. If you're having trouble verifying your email address, it might be because you've used your school's email address to create your account. That's okay, but school emails often block or filter out our messages, so you're going to have trouble verifying your email. To fix that, what you'll want to do is go into the top right corner here and click on your name. This is an example application, so the name is example 1. You should see your application, your applicant name listed here. And then if you go to My Account, takes a minute, you can see your name and your email. You can update this email at any point in time. So when you update it and save it, there'll be a little prompt here to let you know that verification has been sent to your old email address. Once you click that and verify it, your email address will change so that it'll be linked to your new email. So I definitely recommend doing that if you're not getting any emails from us. If you're not getting the verify your email, then you'll want to make sure that you are using a different email address. All right, I'm going to go back to my applications. I'm going to hit continue. And we're going to start. So I've done a lot of these steps already, but I'm going to just walk us through it. And then we'll submit at the very end so you can see what that looks like as well. So the first step here is going to be confirming your FAIR password. This is where you're going to enter the 6-digit FAIR password that you should have received. If not, you can always email us and we'll help you out by either unlocking it for you or giving you the password. If it's incorrect, it will lock the rest of the application, so you can't access any of the other tasks. But again, if you email us, we'll be able to help you out. Another tip I have here is that this is case sensitive, so you want to make sure you're using all caps when you enter in your FAIR password. All right, next is part 1, the registration. So a few things I'll point out on each task. You can see that there's a few different ways it tells you whether or not a task is complete. Right now, this is partially completed, so you'll see a little half circle here and also this progress bar that says 50%. Once the task is fully complete and you've marked it as complete, this will change to a green check mark, and this will be 100% completed. So that's how you know that this is good to go and you have nothing left in this task to fill out. Some tasks do have a second page. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, we're actually on the second page right now. So I'm going to hit previous so we can go back to the first, but you'll be able to click previous or next. All right, and you can see it's back to 0% because I'm on the first page of this task. So just going through it pretty quickly, the first part is pretty basic information, just asking your name, your email address, some contact information for us. Your name for public materials is going to be what we use if you make it further into the competition. And actually, even as an entrant, we love to honor you all for the work that you've done. So we create a web page that has your name on it. So we'll be using this information on any public displays on our website. or public communications. So that's where you can enter in your how you would like your name to be viewed publicly. Mailing address, if you speak another language, you'll be able to check off a few and then describe your fluency. I'm going to say no, just so it's easier to fill out for us right now. We're asked about your alumni status to help our alumni team track that data, and then a parent or guardian contact information as well. On the next page, we're asking more contact information now about your contacts at your school. So in this section, we do want a middle school teacher. There should be someone at the school that you're enrolled in, public or private school or charter or magnet. If we know that, not always it's not always the case where a teacher at your school has been your project mentor or your research mentor, and that's totally okay. If that's the case, you can say that, no, I would not identify my middle school teacher as my research mentor, and then you'll be able to enter in your project mentor information here. Whoever you enter in here will just get a notification if you make it to the top 300 level or a finalist level. We just want to express our thank you and gratitude to them as well for helping to encourage young students like yourself in research. We ask for your principal information. Next, we ask just a couple questions about your science fair and your project. So if you were nominated, the first question that we ask here asks if you received a second nomination from a science fair. So you might have participated at a local regional fair as well as your state science fair, and you might have gotten a nomination from both of those fairs. If that's the case, you would say yes, and you can enter in that second fair password here. If that's not the case, you just click no. It does not matter whatsoever if you have received 2 nominations or not. That has no weight on your application or the evaluation of your application. We use it on our end just to track how many nominees our fairs have named. If you have a team project, you'll want to click yes and enter in the names of your teammates here as well. As a friendly reminder, everyone needs to submit their own application, even if you're part of a team. So each team member should be opening up their own application and answering the questions independently. If you're a part of a team and not all of your teammates want to apply, that's also totally fine. You still want to list your teammates here because you did conduct your research as part of a team, but that's okay if they're not going to apply. It doesn't have any weight on your application as well. So I think most of this is completed. I'm going to go ahead and actually, let me just double check this. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and mark this as complete. Oops. So if this is a good note, if something is missing, it will tell you, and you should go back and see, oh, I did not enter in this information. And a lot of our fields have validations, so it won't let you enter in anything other than an email address, for example, in those fields. All right, so now this is complete. You can see that this is totally done. I have a green check mark here, and everything is no longer editable. If you wanted to edit this task, you'll go ahead and click these 3 dots at the top here and click edit. This will open it back up. I don't recommend hitting the reset button. This will wipe everything in this task, so don't do that unless you just want to start over blank. And you can also download the task if you want to keep that for your records. I definitely recommend downloading the whole application after you've hit submit so that you have that for your records as well. All right, moving on to part 2. Part 2 asks a little bit about your school and research experience and a little bit more about you. It asks for your grade, what type of school you go to. This is where you're going to look up your school and email us if you can't find it here. Asks for some basic demographic information. That's also all optional. It asks, we have a couple questions just about a little bit more background about why you decided to conduct a research project this year, and a few more questions about your research experience overall. The question about invention, this helps our communications team help describe your project if you make it to the top 300 or finalist stage. So you can tell us about why you consider your project an invention here, and then just fill in a reminder about whether or not this is a team project. So this should be complete. Let's see. Great. Moving on to part 3, project information. So this is going to be the bulk of the application. This is all about your project. So if you're feeling stumped, I recommend taking a look at your science fair poster or your project board or any of the digital materials you might have produced for your science fair this year to help you out. You're an expert on your project, so you already know this information in and out. You might feel stumped just writing it down, and that's totally okay. Another tip that we have is to answer the questions out loud and pretend like you're in a judging interview. That's kind of how we've styled this section. So if you answer these questions out loud and record yourself, then you can maybe scribe those answers down, and it'll help you get started on writing down these answers. We also recommend writing your answers down first in Word or Google Docs so that you have it saved as a copy, just in case there are any technical glitches in the application system. That way you'll always have a record to go back to. Going through this section, we ask for a few I think I'm also on the second page, so I'm going to go down and start at the very beginning here. All right, so this is page 1 of the project essay section. So the first question asks what for a project category. So you can read all of the descriptions in this document here. When you click it, it'll open up a new page. And we asked for your project category so that we can assign an evaluator with the right expertise to read your project. Most of our evaluators can read across disciplines, so don't worry too much if you're having trouble picking it. I would recommend going with what's closely related to whatever project category you selected for your local fair. And if you have any questions, you can email us. Your project title, you can use a different project title from what you entered at your local fair as well. That's perfectly fine. If you have any special characters or formatting for your project title, that's where you'll enter it so that we make sure to get it right when we're displaying anything on our website or in any materials. Your project summary, you have 2 options here. You can either submit an abstract or pretend like you are giving an elevator pitch about your project. So you can choose one of these and then fill out your response here. You'll notice in this section that most essays have a word limit. So it'll give you a little count as you're typing it in, and it'll show you what the maximum word count is for each question. You don't have to worry if you're not filling all the way up to the word count. That's totally okay. You're not required to fill it up to the max. If your answers are shorter, that's perfectly fine. We asked for your information, just wanted to know more about what was the motivation behind your project. If your project was assigned or you got your idea from an external source, that's also okay. You can describe that source here and what, if anything, that you did to make it original. A few more questions. Is if we have permission to share the summary with media, again, once you're a top 300 junior innovator or finalist, and then why your topic was important to research. On the next page, we're asking questions that are a little bit more in depth about your project. What was your research question, or what was the problem that you wanted to solve? Your hypothesis, your methods, all of the good stuff there. In this section, you can fill out your answers either in bullet form or paragraph form, whatever feels most natural to you. A few more things about what was your favorite part about working on your project, what problems arose, if you have future designs or future ideas for your project, what would those be? We also ask for where you conducted your experimentation, so you can select any one of these options, multiple options here. We ask about who helped and who contributed to your research. We know that science and engineering is not a solitary activity, and that's okay to have, a mentor that helps advise you. And this is your chance in the application to tell us more about that. If you're a member of a team, you'll want to tell in the application, you'll want to list out each team member's role in the research project, how you divided up the work amongst yourselves. If you have references, you can include them here, but it is not required. This is totally optional, so you don't have to feel obligated to fill that out. The same thing with this question about COVID-19. We know it's still impacting students in different ways, so if you have anything to share there, you can, but it is optional. All right, we're going to mark that as complete. Move on to the essay questions. So the application and the competition itself asks more than just your research project. It asks about you as a person. So this is where you get to kind of show a little bit more about that. Tell evaluators and judges your thoughts about STEM as they relate to your project and just in general. So we have a few different essay prompts here. The first is an about me question. There are 2 different question types you can select from, and then you'll put in your response here. Same thing for solve a problem. We have 2 different options to select from. And for this question, I will also say you don't have to do a lot of external research on it. The point of the question is not to make you go do another science fair project, but just to see how you think critically about something that you might not know a whole lot about. So don't worry about, again, doing a whole lot of external research for this. It's more about seeing what your thought process is and how you would approach something from start to finish when you don't know much about the topic to begin. Your STEM story. This is a question that's just asking about how you became interested in STEM and scientific research. This last question here is your personal story. If you feel like there's anything missing from your application, this is your chance to talk more about that. It's optional, so you don't have to fill it out. But if you do, there's a word count in all of these questions as well. And then once you're done, you can mark complete. All right. Oh, and I realized I skipped over a very important part here, the visual aid. So we often get a lot of questions about the visual aid. And so I want to refer you to this section. The full rules can be found here as well, but we've copied and pasted the information just on the visual aid here so that is easily accessible. The main things that you want to keep in mind are that the visual aid should be no more than 2 pages. We have a few recommendations here. We recommend no more than 3 visuals per page. We recommend a certain font size. And this is all just to make sure that your document is readable and it's not too crammed with a lot of figures and a lot of text that's hard to read. So that's the main thing you want to keep in mind. Your job is to choose the best figures, graphs, charts, the best visuals that really represent your project and include them in your visual aid. This section is probably the most important to pay attention to, the things that are not allowed. So no links to anything external, including applications you might have built, no audio or video. Any identifiable photographs should be blurred or covered up in a digital way. Any text beyond captions of images. So basically this just means that your visual aid should not be a section where you include any additional responses to the essay questions in the application. Titles of figures, captions, numbers and graphs, all of that is fine and totally okay to include in your visual aid. Photographs of your physical project board, also not recommended here. It's just not going to be easy to see anything that's presented on a photograph of your board. So the better thing to do is to take those images and format them to fit in the 2-page visual aid. Same thing goes for your digital file or presentation. Digital poster file or presentation slides. A lot of those typically include text that you would have already had in your project essays section. So again, we're just looking for visuals in this document. I've already completed this section, so now I'm going to go on to part 5. This is the personal interests. Again, this section is asking you just a little bit more about yourself so the judges can get to know you better. This is also used by our communications team for media purposes when you make it to that top 300 or finalist level. So it asks for what activities you're currently involved in, instruments you play, sports you play. A few other questions here. Most of these questions are optional. At the very bottom, we ask about what careers you're interested in. So you can select one and fill that out. And the last bulk of the application is the science fair paperwork wizard. So I mentioned this earlier, but this section is really asking all about what safety precautions you took while conducting your research. So you want to be as thorough as possible in this section. The first thing it asks is your research experimentation location. This will type in what you entered in part 3 of the application before. If you have any other locations you want to add, you can say yes, fill that in here. If this is correct, that's the only location you conducted your research at, then you can click no. The next question just asks for a summary of your approval and permission process. So who approved your project idea? Did you complete any paperwork? What was the review and permission process before you started your research? That's what you want to describe here. The next question just asks about level of risk. We know all projects involve some level of risk. So this is asking more about that. Who supervised your project while you were actually conducting your research? Did you use any harmful or hazardous chemical devices? You can think about, what maybe you would, what might be questionable for a younger sibling to be using. If you use something like that in your research project, talk more about that here and tell us how you were being safe while you were using that device or that substance, that material. We ask for your start and end dates of your research. This is the start and end dates of when you actually were working on your research project. So not the science fair, but what was the start of your research and when did you finish your research? If your project was a continuation from a previous year, you can click yes, then you'll be asked to upload a continuation form. If not, you don't need to worry about it. And when I say a continuation of a research project, say you might have had a research project a year ago or 2 years ago, and then this year you're building upon that idea in some way or form, that would be considered a continuation. This next question is really important. It's asking for what all you used in your research. So things like human participants, vertebrate animals, microorganisms. You want to select any and all of the items here as they relate to your project. If you didn't collect or work with any of these things, you can select none of the above. And the last question is about the science fair safety paperwork that you might have submitted. So if you submitted science fair paperwork, it's likely that you would have submitted paperwork to your fair if you worked with something listed above in this in the previous question. You'll click yes, and then you'll be asked to upload that. If you submitted paperwork, but you no longer have a copy, that's okay. We'll ask you to submit a letter from an adult that supervised or reviewed your project to describe what the safety precautions were that you took, what approvals you got, all of the above. And if you did not submit anything, you hit no. I would just think about that really hard, especially if you did select anything above here. And the safest option is always to click yes and then have a parent or guardian, or ideally a teacher, upload a letter to say, or send you a letter that you can upload that says what you did to be safe while conducting your research. And okay, I'm going to pause for a second while I enter in some information here. For some reason, it's not letting me upload a file, so I might not be able to show you how to submit, but that's okay. Oh, looks like we can. All right, here we go. Mark is complete. Awesome. So now you can see on the side here that I have submitted or I've completed all tasks in the application. But the very last thing we need to do is actually hit that submit button. So once you hit submit, it'll say to confirm. You can review it if you would like at this stage. Otherwise, you can go ahead and submit. And now you're all done. So you can go back to your applications. And like I said earlier, I recommend clicking here and downloading a copy of your application so that you have it once it's totally complete. And if you wanted to edit anything, say you forgot something that you wanted to add in your project information section, if you click on the task and click these three dots, once you hit edit, you'll be able to open it up again, make edits, and then you can see that it's no longer showing that this is complete. I have 8 out of 9 tasks complete. So you want to make sure that once you're absolutely done, you hit mark as complete at the bottom again, and then your edits are saved and you should be good to go. If you do make any edits, I also recommend downloading your application again, just so you can be extra sure that you have completed everything and all of your edits that you've made actually saved and went through. All right, so that concludes the application walkthrough. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, or actually I'm going to share back that PowerPoint so we can show you some helpful links. I'm going to take a minute to look at the chat so we can start answering some questions. And I'll leave this page up so that you can take a picture or save these links for resources if you need them after this webinar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at your questions. All right. The first question I see is about being nominated by 2 fairs. Which one should you use in the application? It doesn't matter which one you enter in first. You have the option again in that second, in part 1, to enter in your second fair password. So as long as you're entering both in there in either order, we'll get that data. So that doesn't, that you can choose which one you want to enter in which field. I have a question here about from start to finish, approximately how long should it take to complete the application form? That's a good question, but honestly, it really depends on each student and your comfort level with typing up your answers. I will say that each year we do get several applicants that open applications on the last day and actually submit it on that last day. We don't recommend waiting until the last day to start. But that should show you that it's still actually doable. So if you start now, you're going to have plenty of time to finish that application before the deadline. Some questions about more specifically about the application. So a question about the methodology question: explain your methodology and procedures for carrying out your project or building your design in detail, addressing the questions below. What does this mean? Yes, it just means to put in your procedures. How did you conduct your research? If you had a question, what were the steps that you took to answer that research question? The same thing goes for another question about just what does it mean for how did you analyze, interpret your data? Just put your data analysis there, whatever you did to look at your results. If you collected an average or calculated an average, for example, if you did any kind of analysis on your data, that's where you would talk about it. A question about engineering design criteria and what is it? You might have had this if you were building a prototype of something. You might have said, I want to make sure that I am building a device that meets A, B, and C, and those are the requirements that I wanted to meet. Those are your design requirements. I'm not being very creative right now and thinking of examples, but basically it's the thoughts that you had before you were creating something or designing a prototype to say, this is what I want my device or prototype to do. These are the requirements that I have in mind. That's what you're going to explain in that section. So a few questions about the visual aid. And again, the few points I'll make are that one, I think the most important thing to do is pay attention to the things that we say do not include in the visual aid, such as those links, identifiable photographs. Everything else is really a recommendation. This visual aid is basically your chance to put in any graphs, any charts, any figures related to your project. If you had a science fair board, if you went and had an in-person fair this year, your poster board probably had a lot of text that you're already answering in part 3 of the application. What was my research project about? Well, what did I do? What was my question? What were my conclusions? Your fair project board probably also has images. It has the graphs that you used that show your data analysis. It might have pictures of, your bacteria plate if you were, using culturing microorganisms or something like that. And so your visual, because in the application itself, you can't include any pictures in those sections, the visual aid is meant to be the place where you can include all of those pictures. So any of those graphs, pictures, images, charts, anything that represents your data, that's probably the most important thing that you're going to want to include in the visual aid. Diagrams, flow charts, all of that is fine. You're looking for it's really up to you to decide how you want to visually represent your research. Another question about teams here. It's totally fine if not all of the team members in your team want to open or complete an application. You do not all need to do it. If only 1 out of a 3-person team wants to submit an application, that's completely fine. If only 2 want to submit, that's also completely fine. We'll take a couple more questions here. For the visual aid, in terms of the number of visuals you can put on a page, it's okay if you put more than 3. We recommend 3 just so that it keeps everything readable and you're not cramming in a whole lot of information there. Some folks also like to group things together, and that can count as 1 visual, so that's totally fine. All right, I think we're about to wrap things up. In terms of how many total applications we get each year, that number varies on the year. Around 2,000 was the average for the past few years. And that all depends on how many students participate in science fairs around the country. But I will say, you all have already shown you have what it takes just by earning a nomination. Only the top 10% of students across the country that participate in affiliated science fairs get nominated to apply to this competition. So that's a huge accomplishment, and you should be really, really proud of the work that you've already done this far. So submitting an application is just another step that could be the icing on the cake. You really have nothing to lose. You already know all about your research project. You've shown that you have what it takes to make it this far just by earning that nomination. So if you complete the application by the deadline, everyone who does that gets a prize package in the mail this summer. So again, you really have nothing to lose and only a cool t-shirt to gain. And also all of the skills that come with practicing writing about your scientific research project and just practicing communication, which is a great skill that's going to help you later in middle school and high school and later in your academic and professional careers. All right, so with that, we're going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining. I just want to say again, that you should be really proud of yourselves for all of the hard work that you've done to make it this far. Excuse me. If you didn't have, if you had a question but we didn't answer it today, you can email us at jic@societyforscience.org. I want to urge you not to take the application too seriously and just put your thoughts on the page and see where it might get you. You can watch our alumni webinar that we did just a few weeks ago and hear from finalists who were in your shoes at 1.2, debating whether or not to submit their application. And they also felt, unsure of next steps and were surprised that they were named finalists. So you really have no idea where you're going to go from here. But your best chance at finding out is completing and submitting that application. So thank you all again. Email us if you have questions and take care. I'm going to sign off in just a minute.